Hello, veterinary friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest for you. Her name is Dr. Cindy Trice. She is a multi-state licensed relief veterinarian with over 18 years of experience. She's the co-founder and CEO of Relief Rover and the co-founder and chief innovation officer at Kick It Pajamas. She's also one of the newest board members for the North American veterinary community. Welcome to the podcast, Cindy. I'm delighted to have you here.
Julie, thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited.
I know. I'm so excited. This is going to be great. We met at the VMX because we were both vying for board positions. So Cindy got it. So I'm so proud of her and excited for her. So anyway, if you could start by telling me about your veterinary journey. That's the question I always ask my guests because I think that's a really good place to start these conversations.
Yeah, so I may in some ways be an outlier because I was not the person who was the kid that always knew they wanted to be a vet. I had no idea. And we always had animals. So, we were a pet household, but so I grew up around animals. But it never occurred to me to be a vet. It was never on my list of things I wanted to be. So I went to college. I got a degree in mass communications. I worked in corporate video production and kind of worked my way up from production assistant to an associate producer. Then I started doing freelance in production work. So I would work on documentaries or movies or commercials or TV shows, just kind of hustling work. And, that may be 2 days of work, or it could have been 8 weeks of work, depending on the show.
Right.
And it was really fun. It was a really fun lifestyle. But at some point, I kind of always say I had this like mid-20s crisis. I did that work for about 6 years.
A young midlife crisis.
It was, yes. And, as I've talked to other people, I've learned like, I'm not the only one that goes through this. It's where you sort of realize like, okay, is this where I think I need to be? Like, I know I have this whole career, work life ahead of me. Have I made the right decision? And that was kind of what I went through. So I call one of my, BFFs that I've known since elementary school. And I'm having this, I probably was in tears and I probably was being melodramatic about the whole thing, undoubtedly. And she gave me this piece of advice. She's like, okay, what would you do if you could do anything you wanted? Don't think about whether it's possible from, whether you think you're smart enough or whether it takes more schooling or, how much it costs to get there. She's like, don't think about that. What would you do if you could do anything? Which I thought was such a fun question.
That's an awesome question, isn't it?
It's, yeah, because she kind of gave me permission to just open my mind. It was like, it was safe to say it. We were just playing a game, right? Like
it's dreaming.
There was no, yeah, it's dreaming. There was no real risk there.
Right.
And I was with a trusted person, so I didn't have to feel foolish no matter what I said.
Right.
So I remember very clearly that I said, I would study the relationship between animals and people. And honestly,
that's cool.
I don't even know what I meant by that exactly.
Yeah, but that's a really cool thought, right?
Yeah. And
that human-animal bond.
Exactly. And I didn't even know to call it that.
Right.
I didn't even, that
Never
wasn't
heard of it.
It wasn't a term in my vocabulary. And so she gave me the best advice. She goes, okay, just go out and get a job working with animals. It does not matter what it is. It doesn't matter how you do it. Just go out and do it. And that's where you start. Nice. And I was like, oh, that's really smart. So I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I picked up 2 volunteer gigs at the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito and at the Lindsay Wildlife Museum. And I just was like, okay, volunteers job is pretty easy to get. Right. And that kind of gave me an in. And then I was still doing production gigs. Like that was how I was making money. And then I ended up applying for a job at a vet clinic as a receptionist. And when I went into the vet clinic to apply for the job, he looks at my resume and it's like all this production work. And he's like, why do you want a job here? And this is the first time it ever occurred to me. This is no way. I said, because I want to be a vet. And I just said that
interview
in that moment.
Like you just pulled that out of your butt.
I totally did.
I love that. That's awesome.
And then, so I got the job, and then through working with him, he was a solo practitioner, San Francisco Pet Hospital, Dr. Lee Morris, and he was awesome. And through that job and seeing what he did, I was like, oh, I actually do want to be a vet.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And so then I had very successfully avoided science classes in my undergraduate years. So I had to go take all of those. So I worked, I volunteered, and I went to school at night. And it took me 3.5 years to pick away at all those prereqs that I needed. And then I ended up starting vet school at UC Davis in 2000.
That's awesome. That is a really good story.
Yeah, it's not the typical way people get to it.
No,
But
I mean, I've talked to other veterinarians that it was like their second career. Like I've heard that story before, but the fact that you just
lied
pulled out of your head that you wanted to study animals. Yeah. And then you did that in the interview. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. So yeah.
And
So
then you
that was
actually did it because that, like how old were you when you started vet school?
I started at 30. I graduated
I
at
think
35.
that's intimidating to a lot of people. And it's too bad that it is, right? Because so many people, when they first get out of high school, don't know what they want to do. So why not have a career and then change? Like I've even thought, oh, it'd be fun to be a lawyer. But then you get that idea, well, you're too old to go to school. I really don't think that's true.
My favorite stories are, well, one, I believe that we have however much time we have, right? Like, and none of us know how much time
We
that
don't
is.
know. Yeah.
And but I believe in reinvention. Like, why not? And I also believe that this can take the pressure off of young people or even older people who are having to like make decisions about their life. Like, you don't when you pick something and when you pick to explore something or do something, it doesn't have to be forever. Right. And if you put that pressure on yourself, like, okay, this decision is locking me into something, then it does feel really stressful.
Yes.
And of course, many of us have to make money. You may not have the luxury of being like, oh, I'm going to go travel the world and figure it out.
Right.
I mean, if you do, awesome. Good for you.
More power to you, right?
More power to you. But there is a way to both earn a living, support your lifestyle and, pay your bills and things like that, and continue to explore and grow and figure out who you are, where you want to be. And that can shift, like your values can shift, your priorities can shift during your life through like all sorts of things can shift those. And it is okay to reinvent yourself. I plan to continue reinventing myself. I'm not done.
Well, yeah, I kind of did. I mean, I always wanted to own my own hospital, so I did that. But then as I got older and my kids grew up, I was like, all right, now what am I going to do? Like, what's my next challenge? And so that's how I stumbled across this life coaching thing, and it's just like the best. So yeah, I encourage people to do that. A lot of the people that I coach kind of come to me thinking that they're stuck. Either in vet med or, just in their life. And I think that thought, if you ask the question that your friend asked you, if you could do anything in the world without any restrictions, what would it be? I think that is a really key question.
Yeah. It can really crack open your mind. Yeah. And it may not be that you do the exact thing that you say, but you just open up that space in your brain to start thinking about other things and what you enjoy and
and what interests you.
Yeah,
like I just listed all the stuff that interests me: self-help, leadership, blah blah blah. What could I take all of that and turn it into something? And that's when I was like, oh, this is it, this is cool. Yeah. So that kind of leads me into a question. This is graduation. Like we just graduated a whole new crop of veterinarians and veterinary technicians, right, in May. What about their new vet struggles? Like, do you have some stories or advice for people that are just graduating and getting into this profession with us, other than it's so cool and I'm so excited for them?
Yeah.
Do you have like anything to advise them or talk about?
100%. I do think It's an amazing profession, and I'm super proud to be a part of it with warts and all. And I will tell you, from having been a multi-career person, every career has its has its flaws. Like, it just does. You know, they all have their unique issues and things that if you're a part of any industry, there will be struggles. They'll be different, but there'll be struggles. So I do think that the veterinary industry has some challenges that were not there when I graduated. We had our own.
Things have changed.
Things have changed. Exactly. So
ours were different struggles.
Yeah. But there's some of them line up. And I would say some of the big struggles that, even back then we had is, that feeling of, you've learned a ton, and in some ways you kind of know the most you might ever know right when you graduate from an academic perspective.
Right.
And but the thing that I think all of us need to learn is it is okay to not know, and it is okay to admit that you don't know. That is a challenge for any professional, whether you're a veterinarian or not. It's okay to not know. There's a ton of it. There's a fire hose of information coming at us at all times, and it's constantly changing, and it is impossible to know everything, and you are not expected to.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
I tell that to veterinarians all the time, because we have this imposter syndrome about, I don't know if vet school causes it, if they want us to know everything or they think we should. And then we get out and we think that's the way it is, and it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. I have this story that I don't know, I think I don't really know what the underlying cause is. Like, I know people talk about how we're kind of, self-selected for perfectionists and, things like that. Like, I don't know, maybe there is some truth to some of that. And maybe, vet school, because we're often taught by specialists. And so that is where we're receiving the information. And so you feel like you need to have that level of knowledge, but for every single specialty, right? Like, if you're a general practitioner,
and you don't.
And you can feel the pressure. This is a story that
Can you hear that? Can you hear stuff outside?
I cannot.
Okay. My neighbors are like having something done. It sounds like they're chopping down trees or something. Oh, they are.
Oh, geez. No. I cannot hear it at all.
Grinders and everything. I'm like, oh, great. Good time to. Okay. Well, as long as you can't hear it, we're good.
Yeah, I can't hear it.
Okay. So sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's okay. There are a couple of things that I think experiences that I had that kind of contributed to that feeling of being afraid of looking stupid, or looking stupid either to the client or to your colleagues. Like, I know some of us have a fear of looking stupid in front of our fellow vets that we're working with, or even, the staff, because sometimes the staff will know more than you.
Oh yeah.
And you just have to figure, that's okay. I've been practicing now since 2004, and I still learn things from technicians all the time. And it is this balance of having enough confidence in your education and confidence in your ability to find the information that you need to handle the case, matched with the humility that you don't need to know everything, that it is okay to ask other people for help and advice on a case. And it is okay to admit to the pet parent, this is something I need to research or I need to look up. And, my goal is to help you make the best decision for your pet and give you the best advice that I can. And in this circumstance, this is not something I've run across yet. I would like to consult with some colleagues and, and some of my resources so I can give you the best advice.
Yeah.
Pet parents are totally okay with that.
Well, and I think that builds a stronger relationship with them. I think if you can stand in front of them and say, I don't know what's going on with your pet, but here's what I think we should do. Here's our options to find out. And then working with them to be like, I don't have the money. Okay, what, maybe we should try this, or maybe I can call this person. That negotiation between us and the pet parent and our clients builds that relationship, I think, because then they know you care. You know, you're not just trying to throw some fancy diagnosis at them because you don't know. And I love that you say that, because that is, I think, something that a lot of veterinarians, when they first get out, think that they're supposed to be able to answer all the questions.
Yeah.
And then they have that imposter syndrome about saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like they're so uncomfortable. And I'm like, you have to say, I don't know.
And the client sometimes won't help, because they might, especially if you're young or you look young, they'll often comment on it. How long have you been practicing?
Yeah,
how many of these kinds of cases have you seen?
Yeah.
And we've all experienced that. And you just roll with it. Just roll with it. It's going to happen, and it's okay.
And remain
confident. You know, and agree, remain confident. And possibly a good retort to that is, I am a recent graduate, but I have all the latest medical knowledge at my fingertips, because I just got out of school.
Right.
And, I have access to some of the best minds in veterinary medicine, because I was just recently taught by them.
Right.
You turn it into a positive.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to get that when I first started practicing I was learning bird medicine from one of my mentors that I worked with, Dr. Evans, Randy Evans. And I would walk in the room and you could see the disappointment on the client's face.
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh, we thought we were seeing Dr. Evans. And I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, he's not here today. So if you want to reschedule, you can, or or I'll do my best to help you. And then they would just be like, oh, okay. But you do feel a little bit defeated when someone says that. But if you can just roll with it and be like super confident, nope, it's me, you got me today. They kind of soften, or they do reschedule, which is fine.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't, you'll never please everyone.
Well, yeah. And you can't try, right? Yeah. Well, I love that you said that, because that I don't know thing, I just did a podcast on it. I just did a blog about it. It's like saying I don't know is key. And I coach vets that have such a hard time with it.
Yeah. And one of the things that, you had asked, like, where does that come from? Where does, is it because of vet school? I do think, I had a couple of experiences that probably other people can relate to, that I had to overcome. Process. And I had to recognize that these people who I respected and admired, and still do, made mistakes in how they reflected things to young veterinarians. And here's one example. I was on our emergency critical care rotation, and I was with one of our instructors at UC Davis, very well respected emergency critical care veterinarian. And there was a group of vet students, and we were standing around her, and she answered the call of a referring vet. So we could only hear her side of the conversation. And she, was seemingly very respectful to this referring vet, and answered the question. And and then when she hung up the phone, she said very audibly, and I still to this day do not know if she meant for us to hear or if it was an accident, but she said, "We don't graduate them that stupid. What happens?"
No.
Yes. And I was thought to we all just like shrunk.
Oh, yeah, that's the worst.
And I'm like, she just taught all of us to be terrified to seek advice.
Right. Yeah.
From a colleague and a specialist. Like,
yeah,
here it was the worst lesson she could have taught us. Now, she made a mistake.
Right.
She's not a terrible human being. She made a mistake. And I don't think she may not even realize the impact. That had a huge impact on me.
On a whole class or a whole group of veterinarians.
A whole group of veterinarians. And then, if I fast forward to, I did an internship at it was Florida veterinary specialist at the time, but it was the original Blue Pearl in Tampa, Florida. And I loved my internship. It was great. And the specialists, that taught us were, for the most part, amazing. And I got a great education out of it. But one of the things that some of them would do, which I did complain about, was they would trash the RDVM in front of students and interns. And basically just, when they were reading the record or what,
or they didn't work
exactly.
it up right, or they didn't. Yeah.
And absolutely, listen, I think there is merit when you're teaching young veterinarians. There is merit in critiquing cases, 100%,
and showing them mistakes that somebody could have made.
Yeah, or options, right? Like it wasn't necessarily a mistake. But the thing that they could have said to us as a group of students is, listen, we don't know the circumstances that veterinarian was practicing under. That client could have been refusing things, veterinarian may have, been 2 hours behind and kind of overwhelmed, or who knows, there's
made a snap decision.
And, it's not that they would necessarily have to make excuses, but there's just there is a respectful way to critique a case where you are not setting up this vibe of veterinarians insulting other veterinarians. And I still see it. I see it on the ER all the time. I see ER vets trashing GPs. I see specialists trashing GPs. I see, and ER vets and GPs. I mean, everyone's trashing everyone else. Stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
Well, we don't need to do that. Yeah. I've had similar things sometimes happen to me where you call for advice to an ER or whatever, and they kind of belittle you a little bit. Like, don't you know that? Or you should do, they kind of have that tone.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's probably because they're busy and they don't want to deal with me or whatever. But I often hang up the phone and say, well, I'd like to see you draw blood on a 30-gram budgie.
Right.
That's something I do every day, and I do it well. And so I sometimes kind of try to have that attitude. It's like, okay, they do their thing, I can do mine, and just try to brush off that, just that critique. But it does, it stabs us in the heart. And I kind of had an opposite kind of experience in vet school where I was, and I don't know if I've told this story before on the podcast, but when I was in veterinary school, I had the cattle rotation, and this guy that taught it, Dr. Baker was his name. He was like the god of cow medicine, right? Like in my eyes, he knew everything about cattle. And so I was terrified because I was a small animal kid. I worked with horses a little bit before vet school and small animal, but I knew nothing about farms or cattle. And so I went into this rotation in my senior year, just absolutely terrified that they were going to belittle me and tell me I was stupid and what an idiot, you don't know anything about cows. And so I remember after a week when I was in his rotation of being just all the time, I gotta hide. I can't show anybody that I don't know what I'm doing. He called us each into the office to see how we thought we were doing. So of course I was having a panic attack going in there. And he said, how do you think you're doing? And I was like, well, I know I don't know anything. And I was kind of belittling myself and backpedaling and trying to make excuses for what I had done the week before. And he said, wait a minute. He said, where do you think I grew up? I was like, well, on a farm and, with cattle. Yeah. He's like, no, I was a suburban kid. I knew nothing about cows. I didn't learn about them until I got in veterinary school. I just got interested in them. And that's when I went that way. He said, you're doing great. Your cows in the hospital are the cleanest cows. Cause I would brush them, like horses.
Yeah.
I kept them really clean because that's something I knew how to do. I wanted them to feel good and clean. So if they had poop on them, I would clean it. And so he's like, you're doing great. Don't have that, So he was so reassuring to me, and it helped me so much in my career. Cause I was like, oh, he didn't know a lot of stuff either. Yeah. And now he's the god of cow medicine. So, I can do this. I can learn this. It's all going to be okay. And so I think those kind of lessons, two extremes, right?
Yeah.
But I really do think we have to remember that we're all human and we're all on this learning curve all the time.
Yeah.
I
exactly.
so much. Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter how far into your career you get, there will always be things you don't know. Right.
And
And
sometimes
that's
a
the
lot
point.
more as you get older, like the new vets are coming out and they're like, well, we want to use this drug. And I'm like, oh, I never even heard of it. Okay. Teach
Yeah,
me, you know?
exactly. Like there's something to learn from everyone and from every member of the team. And I really get that a lot as a relief vet. And I do
Yes.
think it helps being, as a relief vet, going to different practices with different teams. I get to see like how other doctors handle cases, and I will ask, I'll be like, well, how does Dr. Cappel handle this type of case? And I'm not asking necessarily because I don't know what to do, or sometimes it might be because I'm not sure what to do.
Right.
But it's because I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to
Yes.
broaden my toolkit and my knowledge base.
Well, and I think that's really good for your team too, to be humble enough to say, what do you think?
Yeah.
I'll sometimes do that with my techs. I'm like, this thing needs a bandage, but I don't know. What do you think? How
Yeah.
should we bandage this? Or what do you think we should do? Or you're better at bandaging than I am. You do it,
Yeah.
I really think that's good for them, and it builds their self-esteem, and it's not bad for us either to be a little humble, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
100% in
So
any part of life.
So I'm going to change the subject a little bit, but it kind of springboards off of this. Have you ever in your career felt like like you do relief work? Do you ever feel like stuck or burned out, or, that's a big problem in our profession right now. Have you ever felt that? And if so, like, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, 100%. I have been there.
Like we all have, right?
Yeah, I have been there as one of those vets that was just really, really burnt out. And I was an intern for a few months. I had to drop out because I got sick. I was an associate for like a year and a half. I went back and did the internship because it bugged me. I didn't finish it. So I went back and started over and did that. And then I went into relief work. And then I came back and I was an associate for 4.5 years. And it was that 4.5 years that I was an associate. Well, it was the latter part of that 4.5 years that I was an associate again, where I burnt out. I was also doing relief a little bit to kind of supplement my income while as an associate. So I certainly take responsibility for the burnout that I was feeling. I was working too much.
Yeah.
I mean, I flat out was working too much.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to look inward, right? And say, what am I doing that I could change?
Yeah. But I'm very customer service oriented. And I worked at a practice, awesome practice. I still do relief there. And they will see anyone, like, we won't turn people away
anytime. Yeah, there are some practices like that.
Yeah. And the thing that I did love about, well, one, it was a good business decision from their perspective. They remain one of the most popular clinics in town, and with the best reputation, I guess is what I mean. But it was terrible for quality of life for the doctors. I was on board with it. They weren't forcing me. I was not really being forced to do what I was doing, but they would. So if it was, they closed at 5:30. If a client came in at 5:29 or even 5:30 on the dot, they would get put in the line of work-ins. And we would sometimes be 10 deep. Yeah. When we closed. And it was crazy. And so we were basically running an after hours urgent care. Now, I felt this, like, this came from me. Some of it came from the business, but a lot of it came from me. Like, I wanted to help those pets. And I didn't want to turn anyone away. I didn't want to turn anyone away. And one thing that would reinforce that is when those pet parents would say to me, "Thank you so much for seeing us. Our regular vet couldn't get us in." Right. And that would only reinforce my, that kind of released all the dopamine. And I'd be like, oh, okay. You're like, I'm the best vet ever. Yeah. Like, it's so good that I'm, staying late and I'm not taking care of myself and all this other stuff, so I do take responsibility for getting burnt out, because I did not create boundaries for myself until it was too late. And then I did get to a point where I just was about to collapse. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And but I
and emotionally,
both.
Like
Both. I was a mess. And I would come home from work and I would literally, like, I couldn't talk. I couldn't speak. I'm married, and I don't have any kids. I'm married, so I have one other person in the household and 2 other dogs to talk to. And I couldn't speak. I didn't want to.
And you're an extrovert, right? Are you
Well,
an extrovert?
I think I'm an extroverted introvert.
Okay.
But
okay.
At the same time,
I don't like to label people, but it's fascinating when you talk at work all day.
Yeah.
And you come, because I'm a talker, but I'll sometimes come home from a long day at work and I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody.
Yes.
I spent my whole day smiling and nodding and talking. I'm like,
yes, exactly. And that was how I felt, but I felt it too. Like it became pathological, right? It wasn't
normal.
I think it was clinical depression. I never got diagnosed or treated or anything like that. But I couldn't speak. I didn't want to eat. I would, but I didn't really want to eat. I didn't want to, watch Netflix with my husband. I just wanted to like sit and stare. I'm like, okay. I was like, this isn't normal.
Yeah, that's burnout for sure, right?
Yeah, total burnout. Yeah. And so I got myself out of it by deciding to go back and do relief so that I could control my own schedule and add some more variety into my life and take some time to figure out what I wanted to do so I could reinvent myself. I knew I needed to get into that reinvention stage. So I went through a whole process, but that was how I got myself out of that situation.
Yeah. So what would your advice be to people that are feeling that way now? Like I coach a lot of people that come to me saying they're stuck. Like that's one of the big lines. I'm stuck. I feel stuck. And because that's a feeling, right? It's never true. Like we're never truly stuck. We feel like we are, but we're not. That, and I'm burned out. And so I know what I would tell them. And mine is not quitting your job. It's more of working on your mindset and, kind of doing the work required to figure out what the problem is, which is kind of what you did. You're like, I need to go back to relief work. I need to, do the work to figure this out. But any like brilliant thoughts that you came up with as going through that you could help somebody that's feeling that way? Like I think one of them is there's a way out.
Yes, there's always a way out. And I agree. You're never truly stuck. It may feel that way. And I felt that way probably for longer than I should have allowed myself to feel that way. But you're never truly stuck. Even if, you certainly, need the income, if you're in a position where you absolutely need.
What makes you feel the most stuck sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. That there are, and I'm not suggesting that quitting your job is always the right decision.
It is.
But things that helped me shift my mindset. Now, this was in combination with quitting my job, which opened up time for me to do these things.
Right.
But I think you could do it even if you're in your job. I had to reset my brain. And how I did that was I decided I am someone who loves novelty. I just get super stimulated by novelty. I love change, which may make me a little bit of an outlier because a lot of people don't love change. I love change.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I started taking different classes. I took a flash nonfiction writing class at one point online. I took painting. I'm not an artist at all, like at all. And I took a painting class. And what I told myself was that this is only to like, kind of like soften up some of those hard places in my brain and like sweep away the cobwebs and open up some channels.
Unlock your creativity.
Exactly. And I told myself when I took that painting class, I was like, Cindy, this is not about getting good at it. This is not about suddenly becoming a painter. And like, I didn't allow myself to have these visions of like, oh my gosh, I find out I'm really amazing at this or whatever. Like it was truly just about forcing my mind to do something different than what it had been like focusing on pretty much all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And doing those things completely changed my mindset and completely changed my perspective. And that worked for me. I don't know that it necessarily works for everyone, or maybe, you know, painting or writing isn't what's going to work for you. But for me, doing something novel can really change your mind.
Yeah, I coach people on this concept that I learned in life coaching, that you can change your feeling, which is your stuckness, right? Or your overwhelm or whatever it is. You can change your feelings by either thinking differently or doing something differently. And so that's exactly what you did. You changed your activity. You took some action, and it wasn't even action in the direction of changing your work, but you took some action to kind of try to unlock that stuckness or that brain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, you know, a big part of it was not just the act of painting or the act of writing. It was the people I met. So I met all these other people, and I realized how small my world had become, you know, where I was just, you know, I have my family and friends, and I have friends who are not in the veterinary space, but I had spent so much of my time in work and so much of my time thinking about work and staying late to finish records or look things up for clients, or the things that a lot of us do, that I had forgotten about the world outside of my little bubble. And
that there's different people with different jobs, and there's
different jobs and different different stressors. And it just like, I don't know, it's like so enlightening, and it just lifted me up in the best way possible.
That's amazing. I think that's great advice. I think if you're really feeling stuck, to just try to take a class or figure out something you're interested in that doesn't involve vet med. You know, we always say take a walk or meditate or yoga, but it's no, do something really cool, you know, that you think is cool. You know, like I tap dance, which is kind of weird,
I know,
but
I love that.
it. So
I love that.
Yeah, it's just kind of like I go to tap class, even though I'll never be a great tap dancer, but it gets my mind in a different spot than being stuck at work, right?
I love that. We talked about that in
Orlando.
We did when
we talked. Yeah, we talked before.
Because I told, when I get stressed at work, I'm kind of famous for this, is how I let out the stress is I tap dance.
Really?
And so people think
That's
I'm silly,
awesome.
Which I don't mind being known as silly. But it just like, I'll do a double time step like a few times. Like, okay, that just like relieved the stress for me.
Yeah, because you got to tell your feet what to do, and you can't think about anything else, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're older like me, it's like that brain has to get to your feet, and it's not always that easy.
No.
Figure that out.
Do you know Dr. Kim Pope Robinson with One
Yeah,
Life Connected?
I just did a Power of 10 in Michigan, and she was one of our speakers. So I just spent a couple days with her about a month ago, and I'm going to have her on the podcast. I keep forgetting to reach out to her, but yeah, I did. I do know her.
So she's awesome. And she came up with this idea called a bubble break. And so when you have her on the podcast, she will explain this much better than I'm going to.
Yeah.
But the idea is that, so she will sometimes bring bubbles to work. And I started doing this. I will, on my relief jobs, I'll bring bubbles and I'll hand them out to the team.
Yeah.
And, you know, you take a bubble break, you know, maybe you pop outside, or at one point we did it over the treatment table, but, and we had the clinic cat was like popping the bubbles, but you take like the little kid bubbles where you pull the little thing out,
the little round thing.
Yeah. And Kim, I'm sorry if you hear this, I'm not explaining it exactly right. You'll do so much better. But basically the idea is that you cannot think of anything else when you're doing that.
Right, because you have to concentrate, right?
You have to take a breath in, you have to concentrate, you're very focused on making the bubble work, and then you're watching it float away. And it truly, and it's silly.
It's pretty genius, right?
It's so genius. It provides you this like sense of like childishness that is fun, right? And that sense of like wonder, and it just brings you back down. And I've done that several times, and I've spread it to other people, and it totally works. So if you can't tap dance, take a bubble break.
Yeah, and on that same thought thread, is there's so many things that you can do in your veterinary hospital with your team to get more childlike, like we did a lot of games, and, if it's nice outside, go outside for lunch and have a picnic, or, jump rope, or I don't know, whatever you can think of that kind of takes everybody back to when you could just have fun, because when you're a kid, all you do is have fun all day long. And it's sad that we've lost that ability to do that again, so that's what tap dancing is for me, or riding my bike. That's kind of a kid thing, just getting out of your way and reliving some of that joy.
Yeah.
And that's what the bubbles, when she talks about the bubbles, I'm like, yeah, that's the kid thing. So, Easter egg hunts at work, treasure hunts, building with Legos, like we've done all of those things. Or that minute to win it game is a blast, just anything that you can think of that, brings everybody back to just being and just experiences. Yeah. So I know once before, and I don't know when I heard this from you, but we talked about an instance where you had that ability to change your mindset in vet med. And I think it was about you not liking dentistry, because I am similar. Like I like dentistry from the standpoint of making the teeth clean, but the patience of it and pulling teeth is difficult for me. So it was a dental.
Yeah, that was one of it.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's a changing mindset story, right?
Totally. And there's a reason for the saying, it's like pulling teeth, right? I mean,
I always say that. I'm like, oh, this is why they came up with that. Like when I'm sitting there and my texts are like, you have to be patient, Dr. Cappel. You have to breathe. You have to count to 10. Like they coach me, because I get so like, I'm going to kill this tooth, and break it.
Oh yeah. So I learned to sing the Jeopardy song.
That's
while you're holding the elevator.
Yeah, that's smart.
So my lesson, one of the sort of life or career lessons I learned from hating dentistry was that when I was, an associate, I had to do dentals. That was part of my job.
Yeah.
And I literally would just feel like sick to my stomach on my surgery day. So we had basically a surgery day where that was all we did all day.
Yeah.
And so, it would be whatever space.
You'd have a neuter and the spay and a dental. Yeah. That's kind of
lump removal, whatever, like all the things. And I would just feel sick to my stomach. And I would always like looking like, please don't let me have any dentals. Please don't let me have any dentals. And of course I would, because so many pets need
the law dentistry. Of attraction, right? The more you see, the more they're going to show up.
And it just made me so frustrated. And I just, I just hated it. And so I started saying to myself, like, I hate dentals. I hate dentals. I would hear myself use that word. I hate. And at one point, so then I was doing, now I've moved on and I'm doing relief work all over. And I want to provide a great experience for my clinic clients. So I consider as a relief vet, the practice is my client. And I want to provide a great service for them. And they, dentals are important for the pets, first and foremost, but it's also an economic engine for the practice.
Sure.
And I didn't want to be that relief vet that was like, I don't do dentals. But I hated doing dentals. And I could have been that relief vet that said, I don't do dentals.
Right. A lot of people do, right?
Right. A lot of people do. And I'm not saying that isn't valid if you don't, but the lesson is not that. The lesson is that I ended up deciding, I was like, why do I hate dentals so much? And I was like, it's because I don't know what I'm doing. That's why I hate dentals.
Yeah.
And so at my own expense, there was no employer paying for this, but it was a business, it was a write-off. I went to the NAVC Institute, and they have like these very focused, subjects that you can go attend for. It's like 3 to 5 days. And the dentistry one, I think, was 5 days. And you just learn, it's wet labs all day. You learn how to properly pull teeth, how to evaluate dental radiographs, what to do how to make flaps, what to do if you break a root, what to do if the root ends up in the sinus, like all these things that we're all terrified of, you learn to do it and you actually do it. I left that institute loving dentistry.
Isn't that funny?
It changed everything for me.
Yeah.
And so the point of the story is when you hear yourself saying, I hate this, I hate that, think to yourself, do I really hate this, or do I just not have enough knowledge on it yet? And can I learn more? And could this turn into something that I either love or a service that I can provide to help these animals? Now, it might be true that sometimes there are things that you just absolutely don't like and you absolutely don't want to do. And I feel like for me, that's orthopedic surgery. I kind of figured that out. And vet school is like, it's just not my jam. And I don't
and it's very specialized. Like you want somebody that knows what they're doing to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that there aren't, that you can't limit your services to the things that you choose to excel at. And, but it's just a reminder. If you find yourself hating something, reflect on that and figure out, do you hate it just because you need to learn more?
Yeah, I love that, because that was true for me too, because I didn't know how to do dentals, and I was of the generation that there were no x-rays. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, you have to do x-rays. And I was like, oh, now I have to pull a lot more teeth, which I don't like doing. Right. And but learning, like taking some classes, signing up for courses, how do I read them? How do I, and then even sometimes I'd be in the middle of a dental and I have a friend who's a cat specialist. If I was doing a cat, I'd be like, oh, I don't know what to do with this tooth, or what do I do with this mouth? But just learning makes it less intimidating.
Yeah. And sometimes it might even make it fun.
Yeah. I do. When I get a really hard tooth out, I dance around and sing the Rocky music because I love it. So they always laugh at me because I'll be like, dun, 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 with my tooth in the air, because it's exciting to get those out successfully. So yeah, I love that. That's a great way to reset your mind. And it really does unlock your feelings. Like you probably have some affection for dentistry now because you think about it differently. Like, I know how to do this. I got this.
Yeah. And
I do too.
And I thought this even when I hated it, but to me, dentistry is it is so impactful. Like there are so many animals with horrible mouths.
Oh yeah.
And when you fix them, it is so incredibly impactful, because I mean, how many times have you heard the story of like, when, they're so afraid to get all those teeth pulled, but then they get all those teeth pulled and the owners are like, oh my God, they're like a puppy again.
Yeah. They
didn't realize how much chronic oral pain they were living in.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just, I probably, if I could like split myself into multiple people, I might in some other version of myself be a veterinary dental specialist, because I love the impact. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's why I used to love cleaning teeth. I didn't really start not liking dentals until I had to pull teeth that weren't like flapping in the breeze,
Right.
And then I was like, oh, this is hard. I don't like this, but just getting that training, you're right. It really does help. So I'm going to change the subject. I want to hear about you being an entrepreneur, the CEO of Relief Rover, right? Or the co-founder. Tell me about Relief Rover.
So Relief Rover is solo founded, bootstrapped. And basically this is when I was kind of recovering from my burnt out phase. And I was taking those courses and my mind was starting to crack open. And one of the things that I started to feel was like, vet med does have these challenges. And and I was getting weighed down by, being in practices, and I'm a relief vet, I'm going to these different practices and hearing the complaints, but not hearing any solutions.
Yeah.
So there was just a lot of complaining and no problem solving. And I thought to myself, like, oh God, it's just weighing me down. And I didn't have the answers either, right? Like, but I was like, there's got to be people who are interested in solving these problems or trying to solve these problems. And I wasn't aware of who they were necessarily. And I got this email for the Veterinary Innovation Summit, which was the very first one they had. And I think this was 2017. And it was at Texas A&M, and just the word innovation was interesting to me because I thought, maybe I'll find my people there.
Yeah.
And so I signed up. I didn't know anybody. I just flew there by myself. This is one thing I do think can be helpful when you're feeling stuck, is if you are a person who's shy about meeting people, which I'm not shy, but like many people, I might feel discomfort in being in a situation where I don't know anybody.
Right.
And having to introduce myself to people is an uncomfortable feeling, for
I think for most people that is.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't look it because we put on a good show.
Right.
Like I'm pretty extroverted, so I can jump into a uncomfortable situation, but it still feels uncomfortable.
Right.
I'm
Exactly.
doing it. It
Exactly.
doesn't look like it on the outside.
It's getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So,
Right.
so I went to this innovation summit, and I just, went to the sessions. I introduced myself to people, and I just started getting this feeling of, wow, these are my people. These are people who are trying to solve problems, who are coming up with solutions, whether it's products or services. And many of them are approaching these problems from having experienced them themselves, sometimes not, sometimes just true business people looking for a business opportunity. But I met a lot of interesting people, and that kind of cracked open my mind to the idea of Relief Rover. So that was one big thing that happened. The second thing that happened was I was sitting at my breakfast table in Florida. I get this little ping from LinkedIn, and it's a solo practitioner out in Truckee, California, which is near Lake Tahoe, which is gorgeous. And I don't know her. She doesn't know me. And she reaches out and she's like, can you cover my maternity leave, this summer? And I'm like, what?
Who are you?
I was like, this is crazy. This is a total needle in a haystack. But I'm just crazy enough to do it. And I have the lifestyle that allows me to do it because I'm a relief vet. I have no children.
Right.
My husband's a freelance photographer. So we can throw the dogs in the car and drive from Florida to California and spend the summer out there. We have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
And so everything lined up. I had a half-hour conversation on the phone with her. I went out and I basically had my own practice for the summer. I worked Monday through Friday. I got out easily on time every day. There's plenty of sun to go hiking and do other things after work. And then I just had a blast on the weekends.
Wow.
And it worked out brilliantly for both of us. And I thought to myself, I can't be the only one. I can't possibly be the only one who's willing to do this.
Yeah.
And so I looked around, I was like, there's no national platform to connect relief veterinarians with opportunities, no matter where those opportunities were. Now there were regional staffing agencies,
right?
But that's different. As a staffing agency, it's a different business model,
right,
than what I wanted to do. The other thing I noticed is that nobody was talking about relief practice at conferences, right? Or really writing about it.
No,
exactly.
It's rare even now.
It is rare even now. And I thought to myself, what about other people who want, like, being a relief vet is a great career choice for some people. And there should be, and it takes a specific skill set that can be learned to do it well and to enjoy it.
Right.
And I was like, someone needs to be talking about this. So I self-anointed myself the expert, which
I can do this.
Yeah.
That's a good attitude. It's like, oh, this is a problem that needs to be solved. I'm going to solve it.
Yeah. And by no means do I know everything. And by no means did, my career as a relief vet unfold perfectly. But I was like, no one else is talking about it, so I'm going to get myself talking about it. Nice. And so I got myself on the speaking circuit. I started doing podcasts, and I started just talking about it. And I invested my own money to build this Relief Rover website, where it's basically a community of relief vets and now technicians. And we now have, it launched in July of 2018, and we now have over 3,700 vets nationwide. We have over 500 techs. We're getting about 100 to 150 new relief pros every month signing up. It's free for the relief side. And then employers pay us to come on, either a low monthly or annual subscription to come on, and they can post as many opportunities as they want. They can reach out to our relief pros, because the relief pros have a profile. They can choose to make their profile invisible, but if they don't want to be reached out to, And then we have a lot of discounts. We partner with Fear Free, with Plums, with Vet Girl, and some others to give discounts to this population of people, because they're, when you go into relief work, you no longer have an employer paying for those things
for
for
all
you.
that, your licenses and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we wanted to, try to help provide some discounts. We also have webinars. We have race approved webinars every month on content that is relevant to relief pros.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I did relief work for a little while years ago, and I'm kind of doing it now a little bit more. So that's a fascinating thing, because it is so different.
It is. It's an interesting way to have a career, and not everyone will like it. But the other interesting thing is that I started Relief Rover for people like me, like people who wanted to be career relief vets. But what I have learned, and what we've, the platform has evolved to help people who are using relief for all sorts of reasons. But some people want to be career relief vets. They're doing it as a career. They love to be business to business service providers. They love serving clinics.
Right.
Then there are the people that are using relief because they are either at some transition phase in their career, or they just need to do it for a few years, maybe while the kids are young, or, like me, I'm in the elder care stage of my life. Maybe it's, caring for older people, or you may have some other responsibility in your life, or hobby, or something else you want to pursue, and you need that flexibility for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I've seen people doing is they're actually using relief work to date before they marry. And when I started noticing this, I was
yeah, to check out clinics. Yeah, I've seen a lot.
This is like the smartest thing in the whole wide world, because I think honestly, everyone should do that. Mm-hmm. I think that veterinarians, and I think this is happening in other industries as well, but veterinarians have lost trust in the job post. And if you think about how crazy it is, how the process by which we agree to this very important relationship of an employer-employee
for years, we sign on for years,
is crazy. So, you read a job post, it has all these promises, which may or may not be true. And you go for one, maybe two interviews at best.
Yeah, working interview for a couple hours, and everyone's on their best behavior.
Everyone's on their best behavior. Exactly. Everyone's on their best behavior.
Don't screw this up for me. As an owner, I'd be like, we have someone coming in, so behave yourselves.
Right. And then you sign some contract, which may or may not include a non-compete, which may or may not affect your ability to work. And it's a serious relationship, and you're going to spend a ton of your life there. We should want, and I always say, when I talk about this at conferences, I always have the audience raise their hand. Like, how many of you are married? Raise your hand. How many of you who are married got married, agreed to get married after 2 dates? Nobody raises their hand.
Right. Zero.
Like, that might happen in Vegas with Elvis and alcohol involved, but it doesn't, otherwise it just doesn't.
But it's so true, happen. Right? You spend more time at work than you do at home a lot of times when you're working full time.
So I really feel like both employers and employees should want this dating period.
Yeah.
And relief is such a perfect way to do that, because it gives you both an opportunity, because it is not only financially expensive for the practice, but it is emotionally expensive and culturally expensive for the practice.
Oh yeah.
And emotionally expensive for both parties. It's disappointing.
Right. Well, yeah, and you don't want to hire a vet. I mean, I hired vets for years. You don't want to hire one and then 6 months later have your whole team saying this isn't working.
Right.
Because you don't want to destroy that person's life by firing them. And it also takes a whole lot of effort to get another vet in the door. Yeah. It's just like, as a employer, you want it to be a good choice.
Yeah.
And it gets easier with experience, but you don't always know, because those candidates are on their best behavior too.
Exactly. It is something both parties should want. And it is far less expensive to hire them, like to agree to some period of time that they'll work as an independent contractor. They'll work relief. And then we decide, then we both come together and we decide, do we want to get married? It's no different than dating.
That's awesome. So how do you get around with Relief Rover, the license thing? Like I was thinking, like I have 2 state licenses, but you said you went to California. Like if somebody was going to travel to do relief, would they have to get multiple licenses? I'm guessing yes, right?
Yeah. You have to be licensed in whatever state. There are some states that will have like temporary licensing and like some ways, but it varies.
Get around it.
Yeah, it varies by state.
Okay.
I happen to have, because I was a UC Davis grad and I got a California license, so I just kept it.
Yeah.
I had a license in Montana for a little while because we were traveling to Montana to do relief. I let that one lapse. It's easy to get back if I wanted to.
Yeah.
I keep one in Washington State and I keep one in Florida.
Okay.
But yeah, you do have to get licensed. And we have a resource on the Relief Forever website, has kind of a breakdown of the down and dirty of what you need for both licensing, and also DEA requirements by state.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's awesome. All right. Is there anything else we need to say about Relief Rover, or I want to go on to your other business, your other entrepreneurial venture a little bit before we close out this podcast?
No. And if anyone's interested in learning more about Relief Rover,
yes, tell us here.
reliefrover.com, or please also feel free to reach out directly to me. And Julie, do they have is there some access they have where I could give?
In the show notes, I'll give all your information, your email, whatever, but at the end we'll say it again. But I'll put this all in. Whatever you want me to add, it'll be available.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't mind if people email me directly either.
Awesome. Okay. So tell me about Kick It.
Okay. So yeah.
When you told me about this, I was like, oh, this is the coolest. People know about this.
So I am all in on this entrepreneurial journey.
I love that because a lot of people are interested in being entrepreneurs, but it's very intimidating.
It is. I will, and it is a roller coaster ride. Like you always hear it. It's a roller coaster ride, but it really is a roller coaster ride. Right. Like they're not joking when they say that. Right. But so Kick It Pajamas, the idea for this started was right when I graduated vet school. I was 3 months into my internship, and I was diagnosed with advanced cervical cancer. And so I had to drop out, and I received chemo, radiation. I was in the hospital a lot because they would do my chemo in the hospital. So I'd be like 7 days in, then out, then in, then out. And a friend of mine, a childhood friend of mine, gave me this cute pair of pajamas that I wore in the hospital. And that changed everything for me. I felt so much better in these pajamas than I did in that uncomfortable, ugly, demeaning hospital gown
with the snaps and your butt hanging out.
Exactly. And it is amazing, like the difference, the psychological difference it made for me. At the time, I was dating my now husband, and so he would come visit me, and I just felt so much better. Like when I felt dressed. But the problem is that the pajamas didn't have the functionality that they needed to make medical care easy for the nurses.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, well, why don't they just make cute pajamas with snaps on the sleeve? and so that's when the idea popped in my head. But I had a lot of recovering to do. Then I went on, and I was starting to work as a vet, and I kind of tucked the idea away for a few years, but then it just kept gnawing at me that I wanted to do this. And so I don't know anything about fashion. And if you ask my friends, I am the least fashionable of all of them. They need to tell me what to wear. So the idea that I would start, sort of fashion company or clothing company is just ludicrous. But this is where I was like, you know what? If we circle back to the beginning of this podcast where we were like, it's okay not to know. It is okay not to know. You
Right.
can always learn.
You can learn. Yeah.
And so what I did was I contacted a fashion school in Tampa, and I just told them my idea. They connected me with the right people there, and we came up with prototypes, and I got things going, and I came up with the name and some branding. And then after several years of trying to get this to go, I put it in the closet. I put it away. I was like, I'm trying to be a vet. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing this all by myself.
Got discouraged.
I got discouraged. I was like, I can't invest any more money than this. I think it's a great idea, but I got to put it away. Fast forward over a decade later, one of my best friends from elementary school, who was a business person, just serendipitously met these two women who own a clothing company. And Beth, my friend, came to me and she's like, Cindy, can we pull Kick It out of the closet? And I was like, let's do it. So the four of us launched Kick It Pajamas. So now we have these people with that kind of manufacturing design expertise. And, Beth is an amazing business person. And then, I brought the story and the idea to the table.
Right. And it's always good to have a story when you're starting a business, right?
Yeah. And so we started selling in December of 2020. And
really new.
Yeah, and we're growing, and we sell pajamas for hospital wear, but also we have a home recovery line. We do other clothing and accessories, and it's all designed with cancer patients in mind, but it could be really honestly for any woman with illness. Right now we only have women's, but we do have plans to launch men's and children's as well eventually. But the idea behind it is that you can, that feeling good with what you're wearing actually does help with your emotional immunity. It makes a difference in how you feel.
Right.
And so we wanted these pajamas to be stylish, comfortable, and functional. And so those three things go into every design that we make.
That's so cool. That's a great idea too. I'm glad that you came back to it, because so many times we have ideas and we're like, that would be a good idea. I every time I'm driving around my area, I'm like, that would be a good place for a veterinary hospital. And then like years later, someone will build one there. I'm like, see, I told you that would have been a good place to build.
And we all like constantly have those ideas. And it is true that not all of them are either worth acting on, or it's not the right timing to act on them. But sometimes there is a huge leap of faith in being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And it's, but it can be worth it. Even if things don't succeed, it can be worth it.
Yeah, you'll learn a lot. I'm sure you're learning a lot about the fashion business and the industry and how things sell and online selling and like all of that.
So much. I'm learning so much. But here's the thing. I am, I definitely, for both Relief Rover and Kick It Pajamas, how I've approached entrepreneurship. I feel like there's two kinds of entrepreneurs. There are entrepreneurs who want, who are business people and are looking for an opportunity to create a successful business. So they're like, where is there a problem and how can I solve it?
And how can I make a lot of money on it?
Yeah. And sometimes how can I make a lot of money on it? Or maybe many times, how can I make a lot of money on it? And then there are entrepreneurs who are trying to solve a problem that they've personally experienced. And they come at it with, like there's it's a different approach in some ways. And both, I wanted to help. I love the veterinary profession so much. I'm so proud to be a veterinary professional. I, with all of my heart, believe that a healthy pool of relief vets are vital to the health of our profession. And so I wanted to be a part of growing and supporting that part of our profession. And then on the other side, I really believe that in helping women with cancer or women going through any kind of illness. And so what keeps me going on both of those when it's hard, and it is hard. Mm-hmm. It is expensive, it's hard, and it is definitely an emotional roller coaster ride, and you've got to buckle in. But what keeps me going is when I receive feedback or when I have helped in on the veterinary side, and when all I have to do is go look for Kick It Pajamas, is go look at our Etsy reviews. They're amazing. They're literally women. It'll make me cry sometimes. Like
Wow.
there was one woman who said, "These pajamas are so amazing. I almost can't wait for my surgery." And
Wow.
then there's the gift givers, because a lot of, people are buying these as gifts for people, and
That's
they'll
what I
say,
thought of.
"Thank you so much for giving us something to give."
Right. Because if someone that you love is suffering through cancer treatment, like what do you do? Like, here's some
Yeah.
flowers, here's some candy,
Yep.
like that. Nothing makes sense. But
Yeah.
that would make sense.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what we say. We say, stay away from the F's and give the C's. So the F's are flowers, fragrance, and food, which don't get me wrong, all like flowers are beautiful. I received all of those things while I was sick. But what I learned from going through that experience is flowers are beautiful but fleeting. And depending on your immune status, you may actually not be allowed to have them.
Right.
If you are really immunosuppressed, they won't let you have flowers in your room.
Right. Yeah.
And then food,
don't feel like
cancer patients need to stay nourished, but you often it's hard to eat, and that you can be very particular about what you're eating. And then fragrance, I had a friend gave me these lavender bath products, which I loved at first. I was like, oh God, it smells so good, and lavender is comforting. And then as the chemo started kicking in, I associated the smell of lavender with feeling nauseous.
Oh no.
And
yeah, that's not good.
And so, food, fragrance, flowers can be tough for cancer patients. So we say, give the C's, give the gifts of care and comfort.
Yeah, that's so smart. I love that. Well, this has been super fun. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
I think we covered a lot, but I do want you to come back. This has been super fun. I'm sure there's plenty more things we can talk about.
I would be happy to. I'm so appreciative of you inviting me on and getting an opportunity to talk. And I am an open book for anyone who wants to reach out to me.
Tell us all the places people can find you if they're able to write it down or remember it or record it.
Yeah.
So put it in the show notes too. So tell me all the places.
So, I mean, I'm on, you can reach out to me personally on LinkedIn, Cindy Trice. And if you want to look into Relief Rover, it's reliefrover.com. Kick It Pajamas is kickitpajamas.com. And I'm happy to have people reach out to me at Cindy Trice DVM at reliefrover.com. Awesome. That's my email. I'm happy to talk about anything relief, entrepreneurship, whatever.
You're an open book.
I'm a total open book.
As am I. We just want to help people, right?
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been great. I've learned a lot about you, more than I knew before, even though I knew some of it. And I'm sure a lot of the things you said will resonate with people out there. So I really enjoyed it. And we'll do it again. We'll come up with another subject to talk about, and we'll have another podcast somewhere, maybe later in the summer, in the fall, or whatever, when you're not busy. But right now I can see you're really busy.
I would love that. I don't foresee myself ever not busy, but that's okay. There's always
we'll make time
to have these wonderful conversations.
Yeah, I love it. All right. It's been so fun. This is Dr. Cindy Trice, and I really appreciate you being here, and have a beautiful week, everyone. Bye, Cindy.
Bye.